Coming up on today's news, a former AEW wrestler is set to return on Dynamite next week. A current AEW wrestler might be leaving the company altogether imminently. An NXT star, very promising one at that, was quietly released not too long ago. And a Hall of Famer talks potentially never saying never. I'm Michael Sidgwick from WhatCulture.
I'm Michael Hamford from WhatCulture.
And this is the news. We begin with, Stu Grayson, formerly of the Dark Order Parish, is scheduled to return on AEW Dynamite next week, as personally revealed by Tony Khan on Twitter. He is set to reunite with Super Smash Bros. Tag team partner and Dark Order stablemate Evil Uno and Dark Order associate Hangman Page to take on the Blackpool Combat Club triumvirate of Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta in trios action. Now, I don't know, and I don't think we've heard any reports of whether this implies a new deal has been struck, but next week's episode emanates from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and Stu Grayson resides in Canada, and so this might be a case of sentimentality combining with pragmatism. Now, he left in May 2022 initially because his contract expired and the two parties could not come to terms with an agreement. In August of last year, I believe it was, Grayson spoke to Slam Wrestling and cited the motivating factor behind his departure as basically he just thought he was better than the TV time to which he'd been allotted, and I think I would agree with that. Grayson was tremendous for me, such an explosive athlete. I remember in those early sort of dark days of the Dark Order, where the act just was not remotely over. It was the only thing on the show that didn't get a reaction pretty much, so it was all the more glaring. And yet, when Grayson did that awesome move, and I'm not just saying he's a spot guy, because he isn't, like, he's got a really cool sort of physical, intricate style, but when he did that jump out of the, like, from the middle of the ring, it seemed, over the top turnbuckle, dive to the outside, oh my god, it was propulsive. I'm personally just really chuffed that he's back, and hopefully it's the start of something else for him.
Yeah, I like this for the obvious of what we know with the graphic, even if we don't yet know if this means like a longer deal or anything. I like that for one night the Dark Order feels bigger and more important than it has done for a long time, quite honestly.
Like they're under threat from the BCC, so they need to get
they're like rallying the members back because they're just members were disappearing week after week. I like the fact that if he's only back for one night, it's to be bludgeoned by this new heel BCC, and Jon Moxley especially, in front of Hangman Page no less, and in front of his hometown, well, not hometown, but his home country audience. It's old basic pro wrestling stuff. Of all the places to bring him back, look, AEW are going to do this with Jade Cargill's opponent, aren't they? They're looking for this to feel more of a spectacle Dynamite anyway. This is a smart way to take a match that was already going to be a big deal and make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, I'm just really chuffed. Like, I think Stu Grayson's an absolutely phenomenal professional wrestler. If you agree and you haven't seen a match with the Super Smash Bros. And the Young Bucks from Smash Wrestling, it's available free on YouTube. It will blow your mind. The twists in it, the pace at which it's worked. Like, Stu Grayson, spoiler, does a dive from the outside of the ring and he just disappears off the hard camera. God. He disappears off the hard camera because the propulsion on this dive is so unbelievably spectacular. Moving on, Brian Cage, as reported by Fightful Select, is potentially looking to leave the company when his contract expires. It was, I think, they triggered an extension because they had the option last year. That year is now up, and I think there's been a suggestion that AEW are trying to add time on to the deal for time missed due to injury, but Cage is pushing back on that because he is interested in exploring free agency. He was kind of AWOL in AEW for a while before making a sort of improbable return late last year, and he's subsequently been like slotted in that role where basically Tony Khan, he has his foibles. I think he's a great booker, but he does have his foibles where he'll pick a guy, not a girl because they only have one match per show, but he'll pick a guy to just be the person who for about 6 weeks just seems to lose all of the time. It was Bobby Fish in late 2021. It was Jay Lethal for a lot of 2022. And for Brian Cage, 2023, he had that 6 week lose a lot run, and that seems to be potentially it. What are your thoughts on all of this? Do you know, whatever happens with Brian Cage in ring, whether it's AEW, WWE or beyond that, you kind of know what you're going to get with a Brian Cage offering. And I'm not against that at all, like especially when he arrives at somewhere new. I think it's fresh and he offers like this weird, obviously brilliant hybrid act. He's just someone to look at, like visually arresting as he is there. What I will say about this story, more than just Brian Cage, my favourite detail of this is him pushing back on this injury delay thing. because somebody had to. And if this works, Brian Cage has just etched his legacy. It's a pretty awful new phenomenon within pro wrestling.
In WWE and AEW.
Yeah, like these promoters feel like they're holding performers under lock and key based on an injury that comes as a result of the profession.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, all they tell you about is how you've got to, like, protect yourself and don't try so many injuries, and then it happens, and somehow the independent contractor is the one that suffers that. This is potentially a bigger win for the talent at large if his pushback works.
Yeah.
I think it's just a nasty trend that's crept in the last few years. It felt like it was happening in wartime between WWE and AEW. It was a cynical thing.
Yeah.
Whereas there's no place for that anymore. Let them
still
go.
Think they're in a war. Yeah. I don't personally see it as a war. I think AEW is happily... I've made this point before, right? This is a general point away from Cage, but I've made the point where Tony Khan still talks in sort of war, this is war rhetoric online, on Twitter and the like. I don't think he really wants a war. I don't think he wants that number one slot, because if he does want that number one slot, he's going not the best way around it. And that's a good thing for me, because that means you get like Timothy Thatcher at random on television. You know, he's doing it in an uncompromising way. So the idea that they're doing these tricks to try and prevent other wrestlers, maybe, I'm inferring all of this from going to the competition. Yeah, it just seems like, why bother?
Yeah.
Why bother? If you really wanted to compete with WWE, you wouldn't do this really cool, patient, slow burn product that really satisfies the hardcore fans. But regardless, that is the story. So we'll give you updates, of course, when we hear anything else about the status of Brian Cage. But that was Fightful Select coming through with that story. And another story, the penultimate one for today, is that NXT wrestler Saray, according to Tokyo Sports, was quietly, not released, but her contract expired and she just simply left very quietly a couple of months ago, and she's set to return to in-ring action in Japan imminently. This was always a strange one. She arrived with quite a lot of hype, but the timing never really worked out. And look, for as much as you can say about WWE and NXT, they really did a good job, I think, with the likes of Asuka, Io Shirai, and Kairi Sane, particularly in NXT. Nothing substantial story-wise, but they all got some really great takeover matches. But it never really happened for Saray, and then she was amidst a management shake-up and a total creative overhaul of the brand, and the results in terms of Saray were, quite frankly, I think, disgraceful and just disastrous for her career. She was repackaged, if you can recall, as a magical schoolgirl, complete with the outfit and the oversized glasses. I genuinely thought it was a little bit creepy and just not on, and it didn't get over. And realistically, it just did not work out for Saray, who's got a load of talent. She's got one of those moves in professional wrestling that legitimately is so well worked, and the sleight of hand is so impressive that she looks like she's breaking someone's audible bone and internally decapitating them. So I'd like to see Saray treated as a serious proposition elsewhere, and happily, it looks like I'm going to get my wish.
Yeah, this is not one of them typical WWE bad or North American wrestling bad when it comes to non-American wrestlers. I genuinely think Saray, unfortunately, as you say, a deal was killed by her timing. The NXT that she
terrible creative.
Well, the NXT that she could have thrived in was dead by the time she arrived, and then the one she was forced to try and make work was this amalgamation of a bunch of different ideas, none of which favoured anything more than like jock males or swimsuit model females. That was very much the NXT 2.0 of 2021 when she was repackaged as this magical schoolgirl that would literally, if you never saw this, and it was NXT 2.0, so you probably didn't, you can listen to a great podcast wherever you get them, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, where we review it and preview it every single week. But certainly back then, in August 2021, nobody was watching, and she would literally be in her wrestling gear and then come through the entrance tunnel and be schoolgirl. Sorry, vice versa.
Vice versa.
Schoolgirl backstage, wrestling gear.
You can have a schoolgirl wrestler.
That'd be crazy.
You can actually have university students, so you can. So you can.
They actually teamed together once. There was a...
it's the only good thing.
It's a whole big thing. But it was just never... WWE and any of the version that she wrestled in was never the place for her. You know, those examples that you gave before suggested that. Certainly the NXT work rate golden era, whichever version of it you want to call it, was a place for someone like a Saray. She just wasn't there for that, sadly, so I hope she does better out with that system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kairi's been fine. You know, she left and there was a lot of sort of...
Because she's amazing.
She's awesome, but there was a lot of consternation that WWE are finally getting it with Japanese women, and she's just gone on to prove that it's not necessarily the case. The world is still normal outside of WWE.
Absolutely not. Lastly, Kane has told PW Mania that he's basically a proponent of the never say never philosophy. Do we give a toss about this because he's an arsehole, or should we just get straight to the Twitter questions?
I'd rather, because that feels like a threat rather than a story, doesn't it? Kane might come back.
You know what? It wouldn't be any different because he was pretty slow and immobile for the last 15 years, and his sidewalk slam looked terrible, and he's a dick. What are the Twitter questions, Hamflet?
His last match was when his mask fell off, and then he spent the following years refusing to put one on. Through some questions.
Backwards, almost like he's an idiot.
Almost like he sucks ass.
Almost like he sucks ass, asshole.
We do have some Twitter questions today. It was a very late notice thing, so thank you to those.
Apologies for that. We didn't do our prep.
It's Dudley News. Whoa! We're like the non-crazy.
It's amateur hour. It's very
Right.
earnest and not that great in front of a camera. Not much presence.
We've got a couple of serious questions because normally it'd be Wacky Friday, but again, I forgot that bit too. So we're going to just talk a bit of wrestling.
Yeah.
Who, in your opinion, is AEW's top babyface at the moment? Been in a shoe for a while that there doesn't feel like there is one. That's from Gus, by the way, at Guerrero03. AEW's top babyface.
I have sweeping problems with All Elite Wrestling at present, while also thinking there's still elements of that old, just untouchable magic. And yeah, I do think the lack of... Basically, there was like a defining point where they built from day one in that company to absolute perfection, I might add, the slow burn arc of Hangman Page, very slowly discovering the confidence that he, in fact, could be elite. And then, heartbreakingly, that would just plateau off by design in the storylines, like when he lost the rankings place and all the rest of it. It was all beautifully intricate, brilliantly plotted, and then he was the man. And ever since then CM Punk's arrival in the company, just these philosophies collided about what you're building, or are you building something really cool over the long term, or are you just doing what's best for business in that time? And then it came a kind of a philosophical hodgepodge of what the best idea to do, and that was one of the many reasons why the promotion, I think, faltered in 2022. But they're still so good when they are good that at the conclusion of Texas Death, I thought, well, it has to be Hangman Page.
Yeah.
The guy is just incredible. I had a bit of an epiphany earlier this week, actually. I honestly think he might be one of the best of all time, certainly in North America already. You stack up his body of work, and bear in mind, like, Dynamite quality matches have replaced old pay-per-view matches for me because they're just as good, if not better. So I think his body of work's fantastic. And you know what? I still think Eddie Kingston, I still believe. And the reason why I believe in Eddie Kingston is because he's the easiest guy to believe in professional wrestling. Look, it would be wonderful, far better, if Eddie Kingston had been booked very well the entire time and they didn't just feel like, oh, you know what? Eddie's great. 5 minutes, he can get himself back over and want people to have him win again. That's not good enough, but he, conversely, is good enough to make you think that he can challenge for a title and get you behind him on that journey. What, within 2 minutes of television time? I don't even think that's an exaggeration either.
Sense that's the direction.
Who's it for you?
Right now, like, I can't really argue with Page because he felt like that, and I would like to, but I can't because he certainly felt like that after Revolution. I think, I've said this before, I think Orange Cassidy deserves an amount of credit. 4 years deep, we're into this gimmick that a lot of people have found at very different times an excuse to pillory.
Yeah.
And he's, yet again, kind of as hot as he's ever been, despite the fact he's maybe about to lose a mid-card title. He could have a run.
That's the thing, he's not even really dropped the wonderful sort of shtick of his act. He's not even like developed that much of a character. Like he has, like that Statlander moment at All Out 2021 when he really showed his fire. He's been so clever with when to fire up that if he can evolve into a bit more serious main eventer without losing that which got him over in the first place, what I'm saying is there's actually miles left for him to do, and maybe that's at the very top.
I think there's at minimum a TV run against MJF.
And why?
Because they feel like
minimum stuff.
AEW original headliners, you know, done
and they're
good.
destined to hate each other. Like, what would MJF think of Cassidy as the character anyway?
Exactly, yeah. We'll go next. We'll stick in AEW actually. This is the H stands for, at the H stands for. Thank you very much. We see that you interact with us on Twitter. This is for you, this one, Sidge. Would Sidgwick take 2 women's matches on Dynamite, but one's impromptu?
No. I've got a professional wrestling philosophy, right? In that there is a good and bad version of everything. That's just the way I approach it. There's a good version of blading, there's a bad version of blading. There's a great version of a 40-minute Okada match, and there's a really desperate and cynical version of a great 40-minute Okada version. There is a good and bad version of everything in wrestling, and I like to be fluid when I like sort of try and analyze it. Much like incest and Morris dancing, there is no good version of an impromptu match or an invisible camera. There just isn't. absolute nonsensical developments that cannot coexist with professional wrestling, and I wish they would die forever.
I'm now dreading that you've just come up with two semantic fields that NXT could explore for gimmicks. We'll move on to another area.
This isn't there anymore, it should be fine.
Speaking of NXT, though, we're going to talk about Shawn Michaels. He's recreated recently 2 moments from his career. This is from Brian George, HFX on Twitter. Of course, turned on Marty Jannetty in the barbershop with Toxic Attraction, and the recent pass out of Roxanne Perez in the ring. He's asking, do you think we'll see more? Will someone, for example, lose their smile, or might we see DX 2.0?
You know what might happen?
Go on.
What might happen is that Shawn, in his capacity as like the main creative force of NXT and like an agent, he might start asking the wrestlers to look at their hands and stare in disbelief and horror at the violence they've wrought. You could start doing that.
I think we've already got one. I think we're seeing one now. Grayson Waller looks like a living nightmare to work with. Shawn Michaels, 1992 to 1997 inclusive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like Grayson Waller, he's saying, like, he's on camera, even backstage, hassling Shawn. Shawn must be remembering, right, what did I do to Vince that just ruined his entire week one time? You did that to me on camera.
Grayson Waller could get, like, you know how they used to have the flags of the various logos of the acts in NXT and put them there? They could have an NXT flag on the bill to Stand and Deliver, Gargano versus Waller.
Yeah.
Grayson Waller just puts the NXT flag in the middle of the ring and just dry humps it, and then throws it away. Like the Canadian flag. You should do that.
Absolutely amazing.
You should do it.
That's Johnny Gargano's raging.
Yeah.
Doesn't even wait for his music. Get off it. Get off it.
What did I ever do to you?
Right, we'll end on what I know will be a high for you. Let's try and ruin WrestleMania, because the build's been pretty good. We've got a question from...
I want to enjoy it.
We've got a question from Elon Musk, at Real Slim Brady, G. Which of these would be the absolute worst things to happen at WrestleMania this year? So you can only pick one, I guess.
Okay.
He says Happy Friday as well. Thank you very much.
Happy Friday to you too, and to everyone in the comments.
Indeed. Right. CM Punk returns at WrestleMania and loses to Triple H. Cody loses to Roman. Sammy loses via a Kevin Owens heel turn, or Logan Paul beats Seth in 2 minutes.
What would be the worst?
The worst out of them.
The earnest worst would be Cody losing. It's just time. It is time. Look, you can debate, I think in good faith, about whether or not Cody or Sammy was the guy. I think it's Cody, but that's immaterial to this discussion. What's crucial is that Roman Reigns does the job. It's the expected development. It's been built towards very, very well. Incredibly well, one might say, invisible camera aside. This WWE audience has been energized. They think the power is back. They trust the process. They are returning in very strong number to this product that had alienated them. And it is kind of imperative at this point that they can realize that if I invest in this, and they have to a quite incredible degree, that my investment is rewarded. They want to see Roman Reigns get conquered at WrestleMania 39, and it will be such a return to the heat, oppressive, we know best in the office heat if that doesn't happen. The timing's perfect. Just do the simple thing, stupid.
Yeah, I have to agree. There's obviously quantifiable metrics that you can use about the success of this program and WWE at present. But I think we're looking at I don't know if it would be a paradigm shift, but it's the case of WWE wrecking yet another generation of fan support if they don't deliver this.
Yes.
And that's the sort of thing that's really hard to quantify in the moment, but you can see it afterwards. You like tracing that 2014 Triple H promo when they're just putting the thumb on Bryan and everything like that. Our audience has just disappeared year on year on year on year on year. It's hard to see it for a while. That's the numbers are one thing, but the emotion is another. Yeah. People losing faith in WWE for yet another generation.
And they're back now. Well, not all of them, but a decent, a really impressive number are back.
And I think this is one of them times when you just sort of sense, right, they'll give this a go and they'll stay if Cody wins. If Roman wins, off they go again for the minimum of a year. I think this wrecks WWE's the buzz they've got around them.
Yes.
Which again is very hard to put a number on, but I think it wrecks it for a minimum of a year, because then you're waiting for next year's WrestleMania to try and find something.
That's the thing, faith is so hard to restore and to reward, except it isn't hard to reward. Just do the switch at WrestleMania. People want it. Do you want it? Of course you do. Let us know in the comments section below, and let us know your thoughts on today's news stories. Do not forget to like, share and subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on YouTube. We've got great articles coming your way at whatculture.com/WWE, and of course we've got a stacked weekend, well not really, but we've got a lot of podcasts coming your your way on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. That's us done for today in terms of news, at least, unless something massive breaks later. And for now, I've been Michael Sidgwick from WhatCulture.
I've been Michael Hansford from WhatCulture.
And you can follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. You can follow me at M Sidgwick. You can follow Hamflet at
Michael Hamflet.
Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe, please. We will see you soon.